Jake, it's great to see you today.
Thanks for having me back, Jason.
So, Jake, a lot of people are talking about what is going on now in Kursk, which Ukraine continues to occupy part of the oblast there. What do you make of the situation there?
There's a lot of crazy headlines, especially concerning the arrival of these 10,000 or so North Koreans. But I think that Putin has given a hard deadline to his generals. And unlike previous deadlines that they've all failed to meet, this one might not be elastic. And the reason why is I think Putin is trying to retake this territory in Kursk prior to Donald Trump taking office on January 20th. There will be talks, there will be negotiations. I'm not saying they're going to be successful. We don't know what Trump's plan really is. I honestly think he doesn't have a plan. He's coming up with it now. But Putin doesn't want to talk about Kursk. He doesn't want to talk about Ukraine giving back territory in Russia in exchange for anything else. That is a position to negotiate from weakness, not from strength. This is not what the Russians want. So at the moment, casualties are going insane on the battlefield. Just yesterday, the estimated casualty report for the Russian forces was almost 2,000 soldiers killed, captured, or wounded in a single day. This doesn't feel like progress for the Russians. They're panicking about this chunk of territory, about 1,000 square kilometers, and they want to pretend like this never happened. And they messed up. Ukraine is dug in. They've been there for 3 months, and they're making the Russians pay for every square inch of them taking back their own sovereign territory. And just let them attack. Let them suicide their forces. These 4- and 8-man squads coming at them every 15 to 20 minutes. This is a gift for Ukrainian forces. I understand the battle is horrific. I understand Ukraine is still expending resources and losing soldiers. But if you need to outratio the Russians in a war of attrition, this is a favorable position for the Ukrainian forces. Every time they retreat, and eventually I think they will be expelled from Russian territory, but every time they retreat, you just mine everything. Just mine everything. And now the Russians have to advance through the mines into dug-in positions because they're being told by their generals, you have to do this by January 20th. There is no wait and see. There is no taking precautions. Charge, 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 die, die, die. We're getting so many of these videos of Russian soldiers begging for help, pleading for any kind of relief because their commanders don't care if they live or die.
So, it doesn't sound like a very good day to be in the Russian army. What else are we seeing on the Russian side? Are we seeing any changes in their tactics or strategy or the morale of their soldiers? What's going on inside the Russian army?
So the big push, the big talking point a month or two ago was Pokrovsk, the advance towards Pokrovsk. But it now feels like they've given up in that direction as far as the barrage of attacks, and they are smoothing out the front lines. I do think Ukraine has to be strategic and trade that wheat field, trade that tree line. If you can destroy some vehicles and take out some Russian troops, trading territory for Russian losses is a good deal at this moment. We live in a period of uncertainty. Politically, as far as military aid from the United States, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to continue. I think initially people who supported Russia were excited about Trump's election, but we're already seeing Trump's tone kind of change and some of the people being appointed to his cabinet. So the Russians hoping for relief, we just don't know what's going to happen. People generally don't like that kind of uncertainty. So I can't imagine morale in the Russian forces is very good. We're also noticing these increased sign-up bonuses. In Belgorod, the governor is offering like 3 million rubles or $30,000. Who's taking these deals? We're seeing 60, 70-year-old men signing contracts for that bonus, knowing that it's a death sentence. Anybody who signs a Russian contract, it's not for 1 year, it's not for 2 years. They're lying to you. Your body belongs to the Russian government until you die. These wars of empire are never going to end. Putin's never going to let any of these guys go home and see their families as long as they still have a heartbeat and 4 limbs.
So, what is the strategy of that? How does the Russian army use a guy who's in his late 70s who can't really storm the Ukrainian side? they just sort of send him out there and he gets shot up and he dies. What's the point of that?
In chess, the pawns go first. You send people you don't care about out into no man's land to expose the positions of Ukrainian defenders. Once you know where the fire is coming from, you call in artillery, you call in an airstrike, and then you send the special forces you actually care about to clear that trench. Russia doesn't see any other way of getting through the logjam, the stalemate on the battlefield. This war is so deadly. It's so deadly like no war before, given the increase in technology, given drone technology, AI, infrared. Like, it's just an absolute nightmare. And this war needs to end, but it will only end once someone stops Vladimir Putin. And the Russians believe this just isn't worth it anymore. At the moment, they still feel 3 years into this special military operation, they still have some way to benefit or gain in the long term, and they don't. They need to realize this.
So, what do you make of the fact that so many North Koreans have apparently been landing in Russia? Apparently, they're in Kursk. What's the point of all these North Koreans showing up? What do you think their objective is? And what impact do you think it'll have on how the war plays out?
As far as 10,000 or 11 or 12,000 North Korean troops being sent to Kursk, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't change anything. If Russia is taking four-digit casualties a day, 10,000 troops lasts you less than 10 days. That's less than 2 weeks. But this is a symbolic move showing two nuclear powers forming a military treaty, military alliance to defend each other. And this is supposed to ratchet up tension and make people panic about World War III, about a nuclear war. Putin has exhausted his own nuclear threats. Nobody takes him serious anymore. So, how can you once again get people to panic about World War III and nuclear war? Involve another actor. We have East Asian armies invading Europe for the first time since Genghis Khan. It's
Really?
interesting, but it's not quite the same. So I think it's symbolic, and I can prove it. The North Korean state media has not told their people what's happening. If this was some bold operation, North Korea entering the war, and they were in it to win it, it's a long haul, they would announce it to their people. They would tell their people. I personally think these North Korean soldiers sent to Russia, it's a one-way ticket. They're never going to be allowed to return to the Hermit Kingdom. They've seen things and they've learned things and they've experienced things you're not allowed to know in North Korea, because the North Korean government controls your every action and thought. So North Korea is not fully committed to this war. I don't think they're going to send more troops. This was a publicity stunt. Kim Jong-un likes the attention. There's certain benefits he'll get, as far as some of the experts, some of the generals will return to give reports. I think Kim Jong-un inherited this military from his father and grandfather, and he wants to really understand what is it capable of. And if he gets a bad report, well, at least now he has the information. He probably suspected his military wasn't that good. But this is a real world exercise for the North Koreans and Kim Jong-un.
Well, the North Korean military at least gives you lots of medals, as we've seen their soldiers in their dress uniforms. But overall, do you think that Russia, looking at the situation globally, believes that things are going its direction or not? And I'll set an example. We've seen the elections in Georgia, which Russia stole. In Moldova, it appears that Russia nearly stole the first round, but Maya Sandu, the president there, had a turnaround and won in the second round. We see that they were hoping to disturb the US's elections, and we see Russia's influence in other countries such as Africa, where they've organized a number of coups over the last few years. Globally, do you think that Russia thinks that time is on their side, or do you think that they think that things are only going to get worse for them?
I think Russia does believe that time is on their side because they have to. Because at the moment today, things are not going well. How can you look at the current situation with them hemorrhaging soldiers and their economy in free fall? How can you say that Russia is winning? We have slightly above average inflation here in Western countries. Whereas things in Russia, every day I see these reports, I see these videos, it looks pretty bleak. So Russia is just an agent of chaos, and they're just looking to destabilize any country they can, any country in the world. If it can destabilize, that then becomes a distraction for international organizations, international actors, and then they can't focus on Russia. Russia just doesn't want you to look at them right now. It's all about projecting strength and hiding weaknesses. But Russia has to reach a breaking point at some points. 21% interest rates from the central bank. We're seeing private enterprises fail with massive defaults. Stagflation is real. The cost of living is going up while the ruble is devaluing. 50% of the average Russian's take-home pay is just spent on groceries, never mind childcare or rent or saving for your future, taking vacations. Who does that in Russia? So I've said this before. I think the greatest strength of the Russian people is their willingness to suffer, under their own governments, the czars of the Russian Empire. But in the last century, last 105 years, Russia has broken twice. The 1917 revolution, and then you want to say the collapse of the Soviet Union. People say Russia is never going to collapse. And I counter by saying, based on historical precedents, Russia is one of the most likely countries in the world to collapse. We're 3 years into it. The Western Alliance is still holding. I understand we have free and fair elections. It always looks a bit shaky, but Ukraine is still being supported, and Russia is still being denied their victory. There's a clock counting down to the day where a lot of bad stuff's going to happen for the Russian people.
So, what do you think Putin wishes to achieve at this point? It's clear they're not making many advances. Even liberating Kursk Oblast, Russia, has proven to be very difficult for them. So, looking ahead, seeing that they're taking so little territory and absolutely soaking up so much of the economy of Russia, what does Putin hope to achieve in this war at this point?
Putin is hoping that he can freeze the conflict. He's never going to stop provocations. He still believes he's at war with Ukraine and war with the West. But if he can get drone attacks on oil refineries to stop, or attacks on Black Sea Fleet ships to stop, he just needs the war to simmer down to a manageable level. And then he needs to rearm and rebuild. And he needs Western sanctions to be lifted. Whatever kind of deal he negotiates with Trump, if a deal happens and Ukraine somehow agrees to it, Putin under no circumstances will accept anything that does not return frozen Russian assets. Putin needs the money, and for sanctions to be lifted. It's all economic. Where the lines are drawn on the battlefield today, or who gets what, that's inconsequential in the long term. Putin will start this war again in 4, 5, 10 years, whatever, after he's saved up some money, rebuilt, and crucified the people he's taken. Make sure that there are no challenges to him at home ever. And then he can continue rebuilding his empire. He's gone down this path. He's accepted that this is his destiny. He's not going to go back to being, an autocrat cooperating with Western leaders. Like, he has no interest in ever rejoining the G7 or attending a UN summit in New York City. Like, these are things that he's accepted he's never going to do again. So you might as well out Stalin, out Hitler, Hitler. Just go for the biggest and best title. Make sure that the world is still talking about you 1,000 years from now. And Putin now believes this is his destiny. He wants statues of him put up in Kazakhstan and Mongolia and Finland and Poland and Georgia and Moldova. I mean, the guy is delusional. I don't think it's going to end well for him, but someone has to get to him eventually.
Now, we know that the Russians have very carefully been following the US's elections, which just took place. What scenarios do you think that Russia is hoping will come from the White House?
There are people in Donald Trump's orbit who are sympathetic, friendly, or outright compromised by the Russians. I won't name names, but they're very loud on social media. And so far, we've dodged most of them as Trump is naming members of his cabinet. I don't care what your political opinions are as far as ideology, as long as you put America first. And for people who have been repeating Kremlin propaganda nonstop for the last 2.5 years, they're putting Russia first. And now that Donald Trump has won, nobody is contesting his election. He has won outright. America belongs to him. This is something that I didn't vote for him, but I'm having to accept. And I hope he embraces this role, that the future destiny of the United States is how history will judge his legacy and his reputation. He's approaching 80. Donald Trump, I think, just isn't going to be kicking it much longer. So, yeah, he should start thinking about what kind of legacy he wants to leave. And he has a serious opportunity to be remembered in a very positive light by most of the world if he just stands up for Western democracy, human rights. I understand this isn't what motivates him. I understand he's transactional. He's a businessman. And I think Zelensky has been, with his peace plan, hedging his bets on a Trump return. There are aspects of Zelensky's 5-point peace plan that I think were specifically designed for Trump. One of them being that Ukrainian forces can replace US forces in Europe to protect the continent. This didn't mean anything to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. But for Donald Trump, he can use this as a win. If Ukraine gets to keep their military, Ukraine somehow survives this assault by Russia, and Ukraine wants to be the peacekeepers of Europe, that's an idea I think is appealing to Donald Trump. That's something he can then sell to his base. Look what I did. I got troop reductions on Europe. We redeployed to Asia. We brought them home, whatever. This is just a line of thinking that might appeal to him. The other one is the vast untapped resources, oil and natural gas, raw minerals. Ukraine is blessed and sitting on a literal gold mine under their soil. This is part of the reason why Putin is so desperate to take this territory. I personally don't think Ukraine should be negotiating their natural rights, their natural resources that belong to them. It's their sovereign territory. But if you're going to lose it anyways, and you got to make a deal, maybe there's some kind of deal that Zelensky or the Ukrainian people can make with Trump. Help us win this war, help us maintain our sovereignty, and we'll partner with whatever American corporation you want to get this oil and gas out of the ground, to get these minerals out of the ground. Ukraine will still benefit. This is jobs, this is tax revenue, this is going to help their national budget. But if they've got to partner with an American company instead of a Russian one or a French or a British one, these are the kind of deals that America is going to have to make the next 4 years, because this is just how Trump thinks and operates.
So overall, if I were to ask you, the situation in Ukraine, are you more or less optimistic than you were 6 months ago or a year ago?
I'm not going to lie to people. I'm less optimistic. I wanted Kamala Harris to win because this, at the moment, is a war of attrition. And I think Russia was going to break before the Western alliance supporting Ukraine. We're heading into a period of uncertainty, and we just don't know what Donald Trump is going to do. Is he going to listen to people like RFK Jr., Elon Musk, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who have said terrible things about Ukraine and have promoted Russian propaganda? Or is he going to listen to Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, and the national security apparatus of the United States that says the Russians are not your friends? The Russians are trying to destroy America. Do you want to defend America by supporting Ukraine? Or do you want to return to a multipolar world in which the Soviet Union basically rebuilds itself and the United States is no longer a lone hegemon on the planet? Is that the legacy Donald Trump wants to leave for the American people? We were number one, and now we share that spot with a reinvigorated Russian empire. I'm making this argument on my YouTube channel. I'm not going to stop promoting this narrative. The Russians are not our friends. The Russians are not MAGA's friends. And we need, in the next 60 days, for MAGA people to realize this. And if we can get them on our side, Russia just doesn't stand a chance.
Russia is certainly everyone's enemy. Jake, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me back.